Someone sent me this website. It's outrageous. KesslerRunSucks.com. Kessler Run, for your knowledge, is an Air Force modernization program. I used to work on it. I really learned a lot at Kessler Run. I really had a great experience there. There were some challenges that I think I experienced in addition to the kind of like positive attributes I learned. I also saw some patterns and stuff that changed the way that I operate. Met lifelong friends, kind of like solved some really hardcore problems, and learned a lot. That's like the most exciting thing. I learned so much. Ridiculous website sent to me by someone. I wanted to create a video and reflection on it. I think this will be valuable for folks that haven't heard a ton of different perspectives on Kessler Run. I think there's like a bunch of different extremes and opinions out there, but this is going to come from somebody who's like on the program, who is on multiple product teams, who tried to solve problems, who worked very closely with stakeholders tactically, and wanted to see and align and listen to them and align with what their concerns were. And also just like, I kind of pride myself as like a hardcore realist. I love when things I love when people take into account like material reality, and the goals that we have are actually, honestly assessed, honestly attacked, honestly, kind of prioritized against. So starting at the top, it's ridiculous. Other people's money is their superpower. It's a crazy statement. It's kind of funny. Kessler Run was a pretty expensive program, so I get the kind of jab. And I think honestly, like, the origin story for Kessler Run and the innovation behind the acquisition side of it, which was actually really impressive. I think there was a lot of outstanding acquisition patterns and schemes that came out of that other people were influenced by and created their own programs that we don't always celebrate or index on. But I think the ultimate goal was like, hey, we're not able to really kind of do enough with our program budgets and our money. We're never like actually getting the tech we invest in. I kind of post about this sometimes on LinkedIn, but there's hundreds of thousands of contracts and there's thousands of companies working on all these contracts. And it's like, it's crazy when you just pause in time and you kind of acknowledge the amount of money flowing through these systems. And then you realize like nothing's really changed from a software perspective. Like the fact that somebody has a license to Salesforce is not like some creative innovation, right? Like, there's these massive government off-the-shelf GOTS programs of these like systems that like never see the light of day, and no one's held accountable. No one's like interested in unpacking why these things don't convert or become anything. And so I think foundationally what Kessler Run wanted to do is actually like really noble and awesome. And I loved it. That was one of the most inspiring things that like didn't get celebrated enough. Like we didn't talk about cost savings and converting public capital into capabilities and stuff enough, right? That started to be maybe an echo. I don't even think people bring that up now. It's kind of an echo in the background you hear sometimes when you get down to, what are some goals of innovative programs and kind of industrial modernization. So that first statement's ridiculous. So it goes into saying Kessler Run, former AFL-CMC Detachment 12, but more commonly derided as that cosplay startup with the Star Wars name. So I think there was a lot of power initially in branding. I think the startup thing actually encouraged people to like perform and behave and do things differently. I think it really created a cool platform for people to take risks and have opinions that were different than your standard kind of like program experience. Like, I feel like culture in acquisition shops and in a lot of these kind of like knowledge work, government requirements shops for the longest time was just like so static. It was very dependable because you'd have the same kind of ceremonies. They had their own ceremonies, right? And it just became, there wasn't enough variance in there to like see if there was going to be a different outcome that came out of that kind of coordination, collaboration, information synthesis thing that would happen every year, where you'd meet up for this like requirements meeting and you would turn the output from that requirements meeting into priorities perhaps, and they would get, ranked and, whatever. Like it just wasn't converting to anything. And so I think Kessler Run wanted to, completely tear it all up and start from scratch and say, hey, the private sector kind of approaches things this way. This is how they attract talent. Like you can, wear skinny jeans to work and drink cold brew and like be chill or whatever. And hopefully it like creates a kind of more low key environment, but and a more like performant environment. But I think a lot of that existed, and it actually worked really well. And I appreciate it. I loved like the culture we created. We'd go out and spend time together after work, and it was just like super hardcore and fun. But like also it was it was a new version of performative. There was like a new kind of doctrine for like how you needed to behave and how you needed to think that like constrained legitimate creativity and legitimate variance that would lead to operational outcomes that actually make the US stronger and more capable. And we never indexed on like legitimate performance metrics like cost savings, converting like engineering labor hours into like output that people could extract value from, stuff like that, like hardcore business IQ stuff that the private sector just has to do naturally to be able to be competitive, especially as they grow and get bigger and they're dealing with like a bigger, annual recurring revenue. And, they have to adapt and be a little bit more diligent and disciplined with the way they operate. And we just like never kind of got there. But yeah, and then so next it goes into is the United States Software Development Division, founded in 2017. It's best known for proving that if you slap a Star Wars reference on a PowerPoint deck, you can siphon millions of taxpayer dollars into beanbag chairs, cold brew taps, and LinkedIn humble brags. I'm a big LinkedIner, LinkedIn dude. It's kind of like my kind of like dynamic journal. I think like the algorithms changed quite a bit, so it might not appreciate the way I post anymore. Maybe the community doesn't appreciate the way I post. But unfortunately, like humble bragging is something that's rewarded on LinkedIn. So I think you're going to see more of that. And it's also rewarded for people that want to like, productize their kind of reputation a little bit and commercialize their reputation and drive demand and drive deals and drive revenue and drive opportunity. So it's par for the course. 12 parsecs of hype, 0 parsecs in delivery, get wrecked. No, that's crazy. That actually makes me really frustrated. I recognize the importance of marketing. I think defense tech has gone overboard with it. I think everything seems like very hollow these days. Nothing indexes on industrial novelty or industrial success. I kind of recently commented on a post around kind of this whole like attritable defense strategy thing. And it's like, dude, the US can't do attritable defense. Like we cannot get a lot out of our spend, and we cannot get costs down. I mean, we're maybe the worst at it. And so it's a strategy that conflicts with material reality in the United States right now. So it's like, if you do have certain goals and outcomes, what's like a reasonable way that you can architect a system to perform best to achieve those outcomes? And if your goal is to get to some, high throughput, low cost state, you have to foundationally adapt. And we're doing that, right? We're reindustrializing, but there's so many pieces that need to kind of be adapted. And there's so many like painful institutional levers that have to be torqued. And, I think, anyway, that being the case, a lot of the slogans and jargon is exploited. It's like, I on a post I recently referred to it as like the defense grift apparatus. If you use the term warfighter, you're like in the club, and it's just always like the kind of non-veteran, non-combat deployed community that like leans into that term the most, which I always find hilarious and fascinating. So it's all very like gaslighty, and it's just not super fun. But I do love marketing. I think marketing is powerful. I think communicating things in a way that inspires, especially internally, to get people amped up to come to work, do the thing, execute. I think we had a terrible era of like quiet quitting, during COVID and post-COVID, like every industry, but especially a lot of shops that were just like all about innovation. It's like if you didn't have like the inspirational culture to keep people tied to their workstations and tied to executing the things they needed to execute, and really robust product management practices and project management practices, you were just screwed. I mean, people were like working like 3 jobs, and it was insane. It was gross. And that's trickling out. It still exists a little bit, but there's a lot of power in marketing to persuade people to kind of keep their eye on the prize, stay in the fight. I just recently watched, I'm a huge Jaguars fan, and so that football team had a collapse against the Texans, spectacular collapse. They blew like a 19-point lead or something. And it was easy for them to like just kind of quit for the rest of the season, but instead they had some behind the scenes stuff with the coach, like just, like lecturing the players and like just kind of, inspiring the players and taking accountability for the loss as well. And that there's a lot of power in that. And I think Kessel Run, we had some opportunities to do a little of that, and we didn't necessarily do it too well. I think we could have benefited from more like courageous in the trenches, like we're not doing the right thing, leadership, let's course correct, and we're going to do it together. And it's like, we all like really appreciate each other and stuff. Instead, it was a lot of like, they don't get it, their legacy, they don't get the tech, they don't get the methodologies, they're archaic and all this like weird stuff. And it was just like, some of it was accurate, some of it was inaccurate. None of it really worked because like the way the government's set up, like there's influence and levers and power in different areas, and like the system just has to work and negotiate really effectively to move forward. We saw that with the shutdown. And if you don't, you just like lose, right? Like the only people that lose are you and like the organization and the country. So we just didn't navigate that like in a sophisticated enough way. It's probably a better term for it, but it's like some type of like, operational design, negotiation, innovation or something. But here it goes and talks about Eric Schmidt, touring the AOC and stuff. Said the AOC was whack, at least, like their operations and tech group that promised to smuggle Silicon Valley magic into the military, but mostly smuggled money out of modernization budgets. One of the biggest issues, and then really quick, I guess I'll wrap this all into the same topic, but Kessel Run's first project, Jigsaw, replaced a whiteboard, another scheduling tool. The innovation was delivering a 60% solution and calling it Agile. The hashtag AgileAF was born, which critics noted stood less for Air Force and more for always failing. Oof. That's rough. So to tackle this whole piece, like, there are endless problems to solve. There are endless things to optimize. You're never going to walk into a situation unless it's like Random Rob walking into like a metadata center. And they just have like so much like money and influence and high expectations that it's going to be like a concentrated center of excellence to make that data center perform. That's just an example. I could be wrong, but I'm not going to go in there and be like, oh yeah, hey Zuck, you should really like optimize, like I'm probably going to learn a lot. Yeah. Maybe I'll find some things to like optimize that I particularly empathize with as like a user or someone who's experiencing the environment around them. But dude, like there's endless problems to solve everywhere, and that's got to be our vibe. And so I can totally empathize with the fact that Mr. Schmidt walked into the AOC and was like, hey, there's seems like really like archaic, and I don't know why we're doing things like this. Like that's a feeling you get in a lot of like complex industrial places that have a ton of policy burdens, and they have to like kind of stick with just older systems. You see this all the time in like med tech and like especially small businesses where they're still using fax machines because of like the convenience and how it's like, kind of secure by default and PII/HIPAA compliant by default and stuff. So, there's a lot of nuance to these environments that people don't understand, or they don't always recognize. But yeah, I mean, everything can be optimized at the same time. So one thing I thought was interesting about the AOC was so going into Jigsaw, like the specific, that specific application, that was like, the cream of the crop at Kessel Run. And, everyone wanted to, take a tour on that team. And, I always really appreciated the utility. There was always cost savings associated with it, which was spectacular. Such a cool story that I can like really, really relate to. I wish we did more of that. And yeah, it was just like a really cool tool to champion and stuff. But then like, and it also had like a ton of like really cool, like, extensible applications where like there was some like data science use cases, and there was like some really cool additional things and a fun roadmap that Jigsaw could have potentially been on. But 5 years later or something, after I was at KR, I ran into some OG that worked in that whole ecosystem, and they were like, did you know that whole story about like the whiteboard thing was like some local not local, but like some like an operator who had a background in mathematics. It was like a legitimate, like, mathematician, loved this stuff, was so bored because there was so little throughput in that specific war zone that they just like they abandoned the legacy tech that did kind of what Jigsaw was doing anyway, and just used the whiteboard because it was fun. Like it was just stimulating, and they had the extra capacity and time to be able to do it. And then that became just the default, which is just so insane to think like they had a tool, they went to the whiteboard because it was fun. Like obviously their kind of definition of success was different. And then we went in there and said, oh my goodness, you're using a whiteboard for this thing. And like replaced it with something that was like novel, but also really simple. And it was just like, yeah, it was just like mind blown. But I mean, either way, I think Jigsaw is a really cool capability. Something we didn't do enough of, in my opinion. And, I don't know, like we had a lot of methodologies that were kind of so sacred to the organization, and they were inflexible, and I think it left a lot of value on the table for everything. Like, and by the way, like before I got to Kessler Run, I was coming off of like a DOJ modernization program where we kind of built a foundational React Native application that was a case management tool, and I'll leave it at that. But essentially, it rolled out and created all these ridiculous like hardcore measurable efficiencies. We had a 9-person team. We also created a cross-domain solution, which was like a very kind of bureaucratic and difficult product to release that had a ton of utility, a ton of throughput, daily usage all day, but that synchronized calendars for people across networks. And it was just, so I came from a practical place of like, hey, I worked with a data scientist, and I was a UX engineer / product designer person, and now I'm at this other program, and like there was all these like prescribed methodologies, and like you never knew if it was like consulting voodoo or something like ruthlessly applicable to build a capability that others could extract value from. And so like even like Jigsaw, like we just kind of went in circles and gold plated the same like kind of cool features for a while, but like the data applications of that, that product, and some of like the kind of more horizontal, smart, business savvy utilities that could have been created with Jigsaw were just insane, right? But we just didn't have the muscle to be able to see that and architect that and instrument that and fight those battles and push it that direction. It was all like so low hanging, like, it was just because I understand some of like the frustrations here, right? Like, I mean, a lot of KR and people like underestimate kind of what we were trying to do as well. We were also trying to instruct and train and teach people to create like an entire talent pool that was cleared, that had backgrounds in modern full stack software development and design and data engineering and like all these really cool things. And we did a lot of that. That's a byproduct of Kessler Run that we don't celebrate enough. But also it resulted in like 1 million plus a year for like an awful like crud calculator web application like that would cost like any other private sector company 60 to 80K, if that. And so so it was like very frustrating in a way, but I mean that's kind of just you can't go too crazy with it. I think some of the multipliers for these apps ended up being pretty ridiculous, but yeah, I mean, like you're gonna pay a little extra for defense engineering, especially when you're like upskilling and training people on how to do this and go elsewhere and kind of inspire other people to do this. And that was like a hidden goal that doesn't get celebrated enough, which I think was incredibly smart. That was like one of the unique ingredients that some of the leaders at Kessler Run kind of were strategically like laying the foundation for, and it was left of like this Ukraine conflict where there's a lot of kind of like in the trenches code work being done, and a lot of like tactical innovation in the software space. So it was kind of cool to like see our organization sponsor quote unquote war coding before it was trendy. So yeah, going down Project Kessler Run, the team set up shop in the Boston WeWork offices where millions were spent on beanbags, neon signs, and kombucha taps. I don't think we had kombucha taps. We had other taps, but I don't think we had kombucha taps. The motto, code, deploy, win, was painted on the walls, though insiders joked it should have read pitch, hype, bill. Oof. Whoa. Well, that I will say that office, regardless of all the other details like cost and, some of these other fun things, I think it was a great place for us to kind of demo and inspire people from. It was nuts. Like you went in there and it felt really high end. The security was awesome. Like we kind of innovated around like how to do some of this work in a public space and do it in like a diligent, secure, strategic way. And it was it was fun. Like there was a bunch of like so many interesting lessons learned. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges or frustrations I have about Kessler Run is like we just didn't do a good job at like cataloging all of this. We didn't do a good job at going in there and taking all of our I'll use some jargon, retrospectives and hot washes and, pivot points and all these hard discussions we have. We didn't like put them all in a repository, something that like other people can learn from and perhaps see opportunities or things to avoid or whatever. Like there's so much to learn from that program, and the fact that like so much was injected public capital wise like is kind of interesting. It's like, how much should we spend for what and why, and what are some of the other situations where we got like a total bang for our buck and did some really compelling and interesting things. A lot of them were on like the acquisition level. Like what the influence Kessel Run had on Defense Acquisition University was just phenomenal. Totally changed the way that a lot of these programs buy and build software. And like other programs were doing this too. I'm not going to say it was just Kessel Run, but Kessel Run definitely leaned into new models. We had some of the most incredible acquisition professionals that were like total ninjas, and it was awesome working around them. I actually, one of I was going to save it for the end, but I guess I won't. One of like the big reflection points I had about Kessel Run was like, I wish I had an opportunity to do more innovation with BizOps and like really kind of take public investment and really center all operations around like our public capital and try to encourage the organization to create as much impact with that capital as possible and like use it to measure everything. It's like labor hours, compute, freaking data, like the actual size of teams and scope and licenses, and now like you can incorporate tokens. I mean, financial operations or quote unquote FinOps, but like tying them to capability. It's just such a spectacular mechanism, especially if you don't like gaslight and overmarket and embellish capabilities. If you're like, oh, this thing's cool, like they actually need it, and like if we take it away from them, they're gonna freak out and like harass us and our stakeholders. It's like, no, like, because the way it actually ends up going down is like you would implement something like that, and then there would be like these like crazy marketing explanations for everything, and like the operators wouldn't be surveyed and their feedback wouldn't be appended to kind of our investments as like proof points or validation, or it would be like you would find the right people to like give the feedback so it looked good. Everything, like nothing is about like, can we make material reality better or more enhanced? It's always goalpost shifting, which is like something we as a community need to stop doing if we want to like see more national security modernization and more industrial modernization. I think that's like one of our biggest pitfalls. It makes everything cost so much and everything's so confusing because it's all like marketed and tied to like, can I rug pull someone and turn this investment into somebody else's problem and, shift risk from here to there. It's like everything's so scammy. So yeah, I mean, that's something Kessel Run did really well. Just to recap, acquisitions, phenomenal. Really spectacular. A couple areas I think there, like I said, they could have, we could have innovated and done a better job at is like associating the public capital investments with capabilities and those capabilities impacts. And then like my ultimate goal, my like, Santalus item here is to reinvent CPARs. That would have been beautiful, and come up with a new construct where it was like continuous feedback. It wasn't like, hey, you're a criminal or you're the best person on earth. Like CPARs is so fake and like not really valuable. I mean, unless you get a bad one and you have to like protest it, or I don't know how it all works out. But like, all I know is we have like thousands or tens of thousands of companies, producing thousands of different pieces of software. Nothing ever changes. So it's like all this capital is being injected into this industry. Very little like output other than a few company names. It's like something needs to change, and I have a suspicion that CPARs could be that vehicle that changes that thing. Could be wrong though. Or whatever CPARs stands for, accountability, right? Expectation management. That's like tangible, real, observable. Can have discussions and negotiate over it. So here we go. Code deploy wins dope. I love marketing, like I said. So applications, I'm not going to get too deep into this. Kessel Run software portfolio is often described as aspirational. Highlights include blah, blah, blah. I have a lot of experience with these different products. Some of them are awesome. I mean, they're all like really great in concept. I think we just didn't, the organization like didn't move fast enough. And we didn't, one of the big challenges or one of the big issues I kind of had personally, and then like with everyone, or like with the way we operated, was like the way we used to execute user-centered design and user research and stuff. I mean, one of the common indictments you hear from the field is that like Kessler Run designers would cycle out and more people and they would switch roles, and then you would get the same questions by the same designers about the same things, and you're wasting our users' precious time, which in the private sector you don't have that ability. Every user is a $50 DoorDash gift card. You know, it's not, you can't treat research so cheaply. You can't take it for granted like we did. But I mean, we did endless user research, and I don't even know where all of that is, right? I mean, if anything, that's like the most valuable output of that program. I mean, and there are so many other salvageable products that nobody talks about that I won't go into on this video, but there were some incredible things that could be, that are going to be salvaged and pushed forward and squeezed into other programs and ripped out of this system and added to this system, like that no one ever talks about. There were some really compelling, interesting, policy adjacent little like automations that were built for these products that like, at the service political theater level, like no one just goes that deep because they're probably not even familiar with it. But like, there are so many cool things. But yeah, so to go back to user research, it's like we were so undisciplined and it was so scattered, and we didn't have like this back office that would just clean things up, annotate it, and treat that data set like operational X technology knowledge base / enrichment / data that could de-risk your path forward, something that you can use as a utility. It was all so like scrappy and flexible and like subjective, and there was like a bunch of like academic browbeating between teams and like, did you ask this question, how'd you ask it? Like, it was just so corny. It was like, dude, just like take it all. Like now, especially in this era where like context is like the new core ingredient for everything, with semantic reasoning and generative AI, it's like, oh my goodness, like salvage those repositories, please. Someone organize them, make them like, put them in a place that you can like either like just analyze it from a human perspective, or make it so you can serve chunks of it, contextual threads to a model, and like it's nuts. Like the sky opens up, right? So there are so many things that are salvageable from Kessler Run, and there were some great things that we collected and had access to, but it goes back to like, taking public capital investment seriously. If we had, if we had 5,000 TDYs a year and 60 or 80% of those were user research, and you actually had the conversation, you had some type of like expectation on being good stewards of public capital, you would take those activities more seriously, and you would force some type of research pipeline or flywheel, where you take those insights and you put it into a repository that other people can benefit from, whether it's like our organization, A4L, whoever, right? Like that was a big missed opportunity there, and I think it could still be salvaged, but who knows if it'll ever see the light of day or get funded. Reception supporters, senior leaders dazzled by buzzwords, beanbags, and PowerPoint animations. Critics, literally everyone who had to use this software. I don't think that's like completely true. I think there were a lot of people that benefited and loved using Kessler Run software. I think there was a lot of nuance that we missed and overlooked, and we didn't respect the complexity of the ecosystem we were delivering towards, right? We would kind of gaslight everyone and say, lean product. Like, I love lean product more than anyone, but there's this constant balance and flex of, what's the utility of a product and what friction are we causing by prioritizing certain features before it meets the kind of intent of a larger system that's interconnected, and that's what we were building towards. So there were situations where we would create an incredible experience for one person, and then everyone around them kind of suffered, but they were all part of the same kind of like supply chain, or they were all part of the same kind of value stream, to use jargon. And we didn't do a good job at like understanding the impact of our features and understand the impact of like a new interface that kind of adds complexity to what they're trying to do already. And so, I don't know, there just wasn't like a lot of respect for things. There wasn't a lot of humility. There wasn't a lot of self-awareness. Like, I feel like we were tone deaf about a lot of things, and we would go places and we would feel like exalted and cool. Because I remember walking into a specific facility, on the West Coast. I'm not going to go into detail, but one of the airmen came up to me and was like, "Are you with Kessler Run?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am. Like, it's a great organization. Like, obviously super, super grateful to have worked there and loved it. Like, had so much fun. I would have done anything for my crew." And and I was excited that somebody was interested or knew of us, and they were like, "Hey, what is it like to like apply there? Like, could I potentially, get a job there?" And he like literally had his resume in his hand for me to like bring to somebody in Boston, and I was like, "Wow, we're like famous or whatever." So I never knew if they were giving us like good feedback about like the utility of the things we were building, or they just wanted to be in good favor because we were a very influential organization at the time. As like a hardcore builder that wants to produce things that others can extract value from, that was always very confusing for me. And it was tough to negotiate with leaders in the organization and other people I worked with to say, "Hey, I think we should be doing X, Y, and Z." Because it was always like, "Oh no, they love it. They love it." And it's like, no, they actually don't love it. Like, we're being kind of like gaslit by their interest in, PCSing to our organization, which means they, job transfer from their current position to our organization. And they're incentivized to like make us feel good about what we're building, even if it doesn't solve problems at scale. It's like a lot of like really complex psychology management to gauge whether we were doing the right thing or not because of the environment we created around this like innovation hype cycle. But legacy, okay, move it. So yeah, so we covered supporters, senior leaders dazzled by buzzwords, beanbags, whatever. Operators complain that the apps failed to meet operational needs. I mean, it was so hit or miss. I totally agree. Like, I'd say it's probably 80-20. 80 complained, 20 actually really enjoyed it. I think there was like some like harmonious North Star, this harmonious kind of result that we were expecting that never came, where everything would just connect and it would create this multiplier. And then like the 80% that weren't super excited would randomly shrink down to just 20% not excited and 80% that loved it. But we just never got there. We never got everything working together and kind of overcomplicated everything. I mean, the problems we were solving were 2016 problems. The challenges is they were wrapped with cybersecurity and compliance bureaucracy that we, I think, innovated really well around, but also a lot of interoperability with other organizations that were just like literal layers of bureaucracy of like, I will not give you access to this database, this like old school SQL database via this API because of X, Y, and Z. It was all this like crazy political garbage, which you have to build around, right? Like you're not going to overcome it. And I think a lot of the commercial solutions that work just said like, keep all your nonsense. We're going to build something out here, VC fund it. It's going to work. It's going to, we're going to connect everything and we're just going to bring it in a compliant state to operators in the field, literally overseas. And they're just going to love it because it works. And we sidestepped all the goofball kind of interactions that you have to deal with as like a program to program office type of situation. And that's why they've had a lot of success. But yeah, it was interesting, right? I think we, and it kind of goes back to just like us overcomplicating. We had too many people making decisions. We had too many people in the rooms kind of like theorizing what a good architecture diagram was. Like we were very strategic when we needed to be tactical, and we were very tactical when we needed to be strategic. That's like a huge lesson learned. So coming up with, a mechanism or some leadership role that's like, all right, we're thinking too much, or all right, we're doing too much without, modeling risk and kind of considering some of the things to our left and right, like that. We didn't do a great job at that. And we weren't able to get out of our own way in a lot of situations. Legacy. I covered this earlier, my previous recording, but, Kessel Run is less a factory and more a theater troupe staging elaborate performances of innovation while quietly dismantling functional legacy systems. This indictment, like this charge isn't too wrong. I think, we didn't respect and appreciate the sophistication and complexity of some of the legacy systems. Some of them were kind of held together with tape and bubble gum, but to be honest, like they were all written in like highly performant low level languages like, C and stuff and C++, very similar to how like SpaceX architects their industrial systems today. So, and then we came in with, this like theoretically quick to build, quick to ship new approach, private sector web development where it's abstracted JavaScript libraries and like a bunch of open source packages that you combine to achieve an outcome really fast. Like software development has gotten so quick. Like you could, even before AI, like you could just set up an IDE and have like all your dependencies loaded and be able to like compose interfaces that were connected to things very quickly. I mean, Supabase, like, backend as a service. Now with AI, like, it's just gotten wacky. Like, you can build software in hours, literally. Like, building a fun CRM pipeline tool right now. I started last night, and the thing's insane. Like, it's completely fleshed out with CRUD experiences. You literally, like, generate tasks, and it builds an entire Gantt chart for your campaign and everything based on unstructured inputs like transcripts. I mean, we're entering a crazy space for building things fast. The question is, like, are they dependable and performant? The legacy systems were old school and just clunky, but, like, they were super performant and just, like, worked. And then we came in there selling speed, but for some reason we never progressed from a scope, feature, and complexity perspective. Our apps were always kind of calculator apps with new buttons. And I remember just we would have to get consensus about everything. We would have these, like, really kind of, like, depending on the situation, these, like, unsophisticated sessions where we would like argue about, like, button placement and stuff for hours. And it was just like, there's no way this is worth the labor hours we're putting into it. This is only the symptom of, like, a fake innovation bureaucracy. And so we just didn't build fast enough. And at the same time, we were gaslighting legacy systems that, like, kind of worked, and it was frustrating, right? So, yeah, I mean, that was another thing that, like, I'd recommend programs should avoid. Like, people are biased to their workflows that are complex and high consequential and high risk, like, where they can't just, like, stitch in new things or just reinterpret something. That was something I talked about with somebody recently, where it's like we were implementing modern applications where, it would cause too much friction if we weren't on the ground level and reincepting entire SOPs. But these SOPs are interconnected. It's not like a single person sitting in a single office doing a single thing. They, like, work with other people and hand products off to other folks and rely on outputs from other people to consume and make decisions. And very, very complex. We bit off way more than we could chew. And instead of being self-aware and being humble and, like, seeing how we can architect an experience that might have looked more closely more similarly to a legacy experience, we had to reinvent things. And instead we would just, like, challenge people and tell them they didn't know how to view the world and stuff. And it was kind of frustrating. And ultimately, I think it led to KR not working. But, that's just, like, a reflection that I learned from that experience. And I've tried to take elsewhere and just approach working with people, like architecture consulting, tech consulting differently with people. So rather than leaving behind a trail of working software, Kessel Run left behind a template for grift. Slap a sci-fi name on it, on a unit, sabotage the old systems, funnel money into hype, and call it innovation. The war fighter got less capability. Kessler Run got more speaking slots at defense conferences. Yeah, I don't think it was intended. Like I said earlier, like, I think we just had to index on the right things, and we didn't necessarily focus and prioritize the things that would have, resulted in more success, more trust, more alignment across the Air Force. And we kind of leaned into the hype cycle a little bit, but, that's expected. It's just how can you manage that more effectively and not just only do that. So soon every branch of the military has its own software factory with a sci-fi name, each promising disruption, each delivering little more than a new way to burn money. Or as one WAG summarized, if vaporware were an Olympic sport, Kessel Run would sweep the podium. And if you say agile and cloud native enough times in front of a general, you can fail upward indefinitely. Oh my goodness. Crazy vibes there. Innovation Theater, Buzzword Bingo, had to spend 140 million and still need Excel. Yeah. It's honestly like a rallying cry for, like, how we need to behave and operate in the future. And the first thing that, like, the DoD, the defense, DOW, whatever, the national security ecosystem needs to index on is, like, how do you create a culture that, like, isn't full of shit? And that's really important. It's hard to do. Like, everything's about optics. Everything's about spectacle these days. I had a person that I'm really impressed by, and mentor type, say to me, like, the only thing that matters is perception. And, like, I don't want to believe that's true, right? Like, that's a losing game. Like, America's already lost so much leverage by pushing all the jobs in industrial activities overseas. We're trying to reindustrialize, like, really short-sighted maneuvers, right? And I think our community with scars like these, right, like, where, let's say, like, a cluster of salty folks are giving a bunch of, innovation tryhards, a bunch of shit. Like we should review all this and figure out how to incorporate trust, authenticity, and accountability into the way that we build going forward. I think, like the Doge activities were pretty intense. I think that shook a lot of things up and kind of affected what I just described, like trust and transparency and stuff in certain ways. But also it was kind of like an interesting opportunity to consider efficiency, not necessarily like implementing it the way that Doge wanted to, perhaps, but there's a way that we can get like very, very ruthless and not just live for, textual words, and really think about like, what are we doing with every single hour in our day? What are we doing with every single minute in our hour? Now with like artificial intelligence and being able to generate things and communicate things and empathize with things and decompose things, like knowledge work is dirt cheap. Like everything we used to do is dirt cheap. Like I cut contracts that I would have had to partner with a law firm on, and it's like, well, you're accruing risk. It's like, no, I have like crazy semantic super intelligence that's like considering the way that I've architected this contract and comparing it to like hundreds of millions of other contracts that it's considered and patterns that it's considered. It's like, and cases that it's considered. It's like, I think the risk is in trusting biological intelligence to kind of recommend something that I'm responsible for, to be honest with you. And so I think we need to find a really unique way to let situations like this inspire us to produce more tangible things, produce more things that affect material reality. Like, are we able to extract more materials to produce things? Are we able to run logistics with more agency and more control over the supply chains? Are we able to create manufacturing facilities quickly and staff them with people who are trained up? Are we able to pipeline sophisticated, modern, robotics trained electricians, or just electricians that maybe someday might, evolve to having some input on like contextual expertise for automation, whatever. Like we need to focus on legitimate things, and it's impossible to do that if everyone's posturing all the time. If everything is just like one marketing output against another marketing output, and you're constantly gaslighting each other and trying to control influence and stuff, like it's just a lose-lose game. Like, sure, you might have a bigger salary next year, you might have like more, a higher ARR that helps you exit, but like the reality is like you're not going to have a country to operate in, like if that's the only goal. Like we need to reorganize the system, especially the public sector leaders need to really dial in. And it's a tough time to do that. It's easier said than done. Like a lot of people just took the DRP, like programs are scrutinized about their value and stuff. I mean, we're in a very kind of like authenticity scarcity, right? Like it's easier to say for the warfighter than it is to like sacrifice your weekend, sacrifice your nights, and produce a report that holds like a value stealing contractor accountable, and put your neck out there and like be embarrassed and be vulnerable and lose the opportunity to get a job with some SI or something. Like, and it's not just SIs, it was just like an example, it's everyone. Like that's another thing. Like we're so quick to just like blame and label big categories of things. Everything's nuanced. We need to appreciate nuance more, and we need to index on priorities that matter. We need to focus on the things that we can control, and we can definitely control acquisitions, and we're kind of getting the same result continuously. And I guess the last thing I'll kind of leave us with on this, like, KesslerRunSucks.com topic is like, let's find ways to like extract value out of these programs that maybe don't do so well, or programs that do really well, and qualify what really well means. We need to start using AI to like help us analyze and score good, neutral, and bad. I mean, and be in on the joke that like, of course it's going to hallucinate. Of course it's not perfect. Of course it doesn't have the right numbers, but it has a really sophisticated ability to semantically reason, and like all the money in the world is going into it right now, so I wouldn't want to bet against it. And it's not even like a bet against AI, I want to keep my job thing. I mean just like bet against it in the way that like you're gonna like reason something in a cubby with like some archaic book that's index library style, versus just like think of a creative prompt and like try to learn from that output and associate it with whatever goals you're trying to achieve. Like, we just need to use our time better, and we need to produce more. We need to produce more tangible things. Like, that's what I take away from this website. Ridiculous website. Whoever created it, kudos for having the chops. I wouldn't be brave enough. You know, I'm brave enough to have a bunch of opinions, but I wouldn't be brave enough to put something together like this, at least not now. I haven't gone nuts. I haven't gone that nuts yet. But, you know, I will say I appreciate the kind of teasing and jabs here. You know, I really, it helped me reflect on some things that, you know, I've processed over the years, and I think other people have as well. It's also a reminder that, like, you know, don't take yourself too seriously. We're a competitive country. We're a competitive culture. Like, we need to constantly make sure we're holding each other accountable and building the best thing we possibly can to stay globally competitive. Everyone have an awesome Thanksgiving. I'm super grateful for operating in the community I get to operate in. If you want to chat about this or anything else I've mentioned, please reach out. All right, later.